Hi, I'm Sarah Jane Smith. I'm a qualified quantum healing hypnotherapist. This technique is fast, safe, and very effective. It's far deeper than traditional hypnosis, so your conscious or skeptic mind is out of the way so that healing can occur if it's appropriate. You can also get the answers to all the questions you've had locked deep inside you. This is ideal for helping to heal all sorts of trauma. We'll get an understanding of what caused the issue in the first place. Are you ready to unlock all of your potential? All it takes is just one session. Looking forward to hearing from you. The website is quantumhypno.co.uk. Take care.
Hello, David. I'm very happy to talk to you. This interview is a gift to us. Welcome.
Oh, hello, Flavio Valli. There you go. Thank you very much. It's really nice to talk to you. Hello, everybody. Delighted to be talking to you, and I hope you get something out of it.
Who are we? What are we doing here in this dimension?
Well, what are we doing here, and where are we going? Well, I mean that in the end is a choice. Perception dictates our reality. If you think that you have no power and you're just little me, then you'll live a life that will reflect that. And if you realize that you're something much greater than that, then you'll live a different life. So perception is everything. It's perception that's dictated everything. People went under lockdown meekly, overwhelmingly in the spring of 2020, because their perception was that there was a deadly virus flying around. And the manipulation of perception ever since has been at the very foundation. People have responded and behaved as they have and are because their perceptions have been directed and programmed by those in power, by those in authority, and it's been globally systematic. And so what we're looking at now all over the world is a choice, a perception leading to a choice that is perhaps one of the greatest symbols ever for where people are perceptually. And if you look at the two main groups that are saying, yes, I'll have it, they are groups of people who perceptually are just doing what the authorities tell them and believing it without question. And another part of that yes group are those that really don't want it, but are doing it anyway because they fear the consequences of not doing it, and also has the fortitude, the backbone, the self-respect to say, you can throw whatever you like at us, you can throw your intimidation, you can throw your sanctions, but no matter what you do, we're not having it. That is creating this very different two-track society now, which is fast emerging.
David, tell us a little about the nature of AI.
Well, that's a very interesting question. And I'll start with talking about what is the basis of everything, and it's consciousness. Our perceptions are formed from our consciousness, and our state of consciousness leads to our perceptions. So, for instance, if your consciousness or your sense of reality is limited basically only to the five senses of a human body, can I see it, touch it, taste it, hear it, etc., then you're going to see reality and you're going to see yourself in a particular way, and it's going to be a very limited way. Whereas if you see yourself as ultimately consciousness, a state of being aware, and the body being a vehicle for that awareness to experience this actually tiny band of frequencies we call the human world, then you are going to see yourself in very different terms to someone who's five sense centric. And the whole foundation of the global conspiracy, if you break it down, is to manipulate the population into five sense reality alone. Because when you look into the world, or you look at the world of the five senses, it decodes everything as apart from everything else, with empty space in between. That's the way that it decodes reality. That's how it operates. But actually, if we could go deeper into the visual frequency band, we'd realize that actually there is no empty space, that between all the form that the five senses sees and decodes is actually a stream of energy consciousness which connects everything. And through this, what I call the field, this consciousness that connects everything, all these so-called paranormal happenings and paranormal concepts, it can all be explained once you realize that this field is real. I mean, if you think about it in technological terms, all the computers that are tuned to Wi-Fi or tuned to the internet, they're all connected by that field. It's the same principle. So in the end, how we behave, what we do or don't do, comes from our perceptions, which comes from our state of consciousness. And that this applies obviously to humans, but it applies to any extraterrestrial, otherworldly entities as well. How they behave breaks down to their state of consciousness. You can have benevolent non-human species, or you can have malevolent ones. And the difference between the two is their state of consciousness, their state of perception. So everything comes from perception, everything. And if you look at the common themes that you find when you scan not just the religions, but ancient societies and the native storytellers coming from history to present day, in all these different cultures, you find a common theme of a negative force seeking to manipulate human behavior and manipulate human society. If you look at Christianity, it talks about the devil, Satan, and the demons. You look at the Gnostics in ancient Egypt and other places, who were not straight Christian. There were, things that are similar, but they're not straight Christian. They have a different view of the world in that sense. They talk about their devil is called Yaldabaoth, and their demons are called archons, which is a Greek word meaning rulers, our rulers. You look at Islam, and they talk about the jinn, and how much of the jinn manipulate human society from the unseen, from the hidden. And then you go into the United States and you pick up exactly the same theme among the Native American people. And one of the names that they give to this force is Wetiko. And what they all have in common is that they are describing a very distorted, inverted, chaotic, and what you would call evil in my definition being the absence of love, state of awareness, which I'll call Wetiko, for want of a word, a term. And this Wetiko is that which has sought throughout known human history to manipulate human perception and to direct human behavior. And it goes way back. You can chart it way back into history. And it's a band of frequency, very low frequency, which basically resonates to what I call low vibrational emotion, to fear. The foundation frequency of Wetiko is fear, and anxiety, depression, all these things, resentment, all these low vibrational emotions. That's the frequency band it operates at. So if it wants to control people en masse, it has to pull their perceptual state, their state of consciousness, into these low vibrational states. And like I say, its foundation frequency is fear. And therefore, you look at authority, well, throughout history, and it's always used fear to control the population, fear and manipulating fear. Because what they want is to bring people's consciousness into the frequency band of Wetiko. And then a connection can be made, a vibrational connection, a frequency connection. And Wetiko can start becoming the director of the perceptions of people that it's attached to. And so if you look at the major players in what I call the global cult, this global network of secret societies with a central leadership that's actually behind the horrors of world events and current events, then you're looking at expressions of Wetiko. You look at Bill Gates, you look at Anthony Fauci, you look at Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, you look at all these people that are pushing this, and you're looking at Wetiko. And some of the major players will know that. They'll know their expressions of this consciousness, but many others won't. They've just attached to it, and now it's driving their perceptions and it's driving their behavior. And so you see the behavior I talked about earlier of people who are just unthinkingly following whatever they're told without question, and others that would rather not do it, but are frightened not to do it. And then you've got this other group, the awakening, as we talked about, and they are awakening. You're looking at a different state of consciousness, a state of consciousness that's expanding beyond the five senses, expanding beyond Wetiko. And because of that, Wetiko doesn't impact upon it as it does on those that are in a lower vibrational state. So one of the interesting things with these big London marches that have been going on now month after month since the spring, enormous numbers of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands. One of the things that you notice when you go on these marches, I've been on most of them, is the nature of the people that are taking part. They're overwhelmingly people coming from love, they're coming from joy, they're coming from laughter, they're coming from, hugging people rather than being driven apart. And that is an expression of their state of consciousness. And it's an expression of the nature of the consciousness that actually is saying no to all this, that is seeing through all this. And the difference between the two, I would suggest, is that which has bought it unquestioningly has fallen into the layer, the frequency layer of Wetiko, and those that can see it are expanded outside of that. So we come round to this whole AI, and the goal, therefore, of Wetiko is to attach to every human mind and therefore control every human mind. Now, up to this point in the development of technology, it's had to do it in the way that I'm describing. It's had to run society, structure society in a way that generates among the population maximum fear, maximum anxiety, maximum depression, maximum conflict and division. But the idea of where this is meant to go, where the plan is, and some of them are openly saying it, is to attach the human brain to artificial intelligence. This is the end game of total human perceptual control, because once that attachment takes place, they no longer have to manipulate your perception and control information to manipulate your perception, because your perceptions now come direct from AI. They become the human mind. And I've been writing about this for decades. The plan is to create a situation where every human brain mind is attached to AI, becomes a hive mind with a centrally dictated perceptual dictator. And so, as you indicated, I have looked in the books at what is this AI really? And you have your algorithmic AI, and you have the AI which they call learning AI, where the more data it absorbs, the more AI intelligent it becomes. Because of course, what's been set up is a vast global network to trawl human information. You hear about Facebook and Google and all this, Twitter and all these others, about lack of privacy, and that's absolutely right. But there's a level above that. Everything that is posted on the internet, on these social media platforms, is being fed into AI. So this learning AI becomes far, far, far more knowledgeable about human behavior, human response, human perception, and what comes from it, than humans ever can be, because it's processing all this information that's constantly being posted. But then I say there's another level of AI that is less technological and more actually this Wetiko consciousness. So if you have a situation which I've described, where it's trying to make a frequency connection to the human mind, the human five-sense mind, so it can control and dictate perception and behavior, then if you can get an attachment directly through the technological means to the human brain, the human information processing system, then you can actually infiltrate human minds in that way. And I would say that beyond your algorithmic AI and your learning AI, the real full-blown, quote, AI is actually this Wetiko consciousness, which is in the midst of creating a technological attachment to the human brain through which it can dictate the perceptions of the entire human race. And part of this process is the need to change the nature of the human body from a biological form to a much more synthetic form, which would be more necessary for whatever reasons to this AI attachment. And the communications around the body between the brain and the cellular structure and vice versa, and the harmony or disharmony of those communications dictates whether we are, quote, physically healthy or diseased, disharmonized, and whether we are psychologically balanced or imbalanced. So once people allow this genetic material to get inside them, synthetic, then anything goes. For a long time, and that's where the world is moving very fast now. But we can stop it with a simple 2-letter word: no. But to say no, I'm not doing it, no, I'm not cooperating on a mass scale, means that people first have to have the self-respect to see what's going on and not just believe whatever the authority tells them. And secondly, it has to grow a backbone, a spine of steel, to refuse to cooperate once it's seen what is actually going on.
Some people keep repeating the light won. In the end, will the light win?
Well, yeah, yes, I do. But you know, it's important not to think that it's just happens. You know, we have to be expressions of what people call the light. You know, it's not just it just happens and it happens. We have to become expressions of it. Our behavior has to reflect it, because in the end, we live in this reality, and we need to be central to the behavior changes that bring an end to this. It's no good just sitting around and saying, oh, it will be all right. Well, it won't be if you just sit around. That's not what it's about. It's about tuning in to these higher levels of consciousness, but then becoming a vehicle in our behavior to express them in this reality. You know, I have seen over the years, going way back 31 years now, how so many people that call themselves spiritual don't use spirituality as a vehicle for change, but as a vehicle for escapism. You know, I was told so many times by the many in the spiritual community, going way back decades, that what I was saying was negative, was frightening people, and I should not say it anymore. But what I was doing was warning people where this was going if people did not realize what the game was, where it was meant to go, and intervene in it. And all these decades later, you know, I'm looking at the world I was talking about was coming, if nothing was done, and nothing was done, basically. So maybe we can learn that lesson and realize that if you don't actively intervene, then, and you stand on the other side of the road just watching it happen, then it's going to happen. It's a lesson that vast numbers of people need to learn. You know, if you look at this global cult that's driving the direction of human society, at its core, it's not in full knowledge, its core of the core, you'd get them into a single room. And even if you add up all the other people that are serving the cult, many not realizing there is one, or there is an agenda, they're just doing what they're told. You add together all the law enforcement and the military imposing the will of this cult, again, not knowing that that's their ultimate master. You're still looking at, collectively, at a tiny number of people compared with the number of people being manipulated and directed and imposed upon the human population. We're heading towards 8 billion, apparently. So the answer is staring us in the face. We stop cooperating with our own enslavement. And because unity of response will bring this down overnight. When saying all lives matter is considered racist. You know it's a scam. And it's, you start to realize very quickly why Black Lives Matter has been funded to the tune of something like $90 million by some of the richest people and richest corporations in the world, because it's been set up as a way of dividing down the line of race the target humanity. And you know, we need to grow up, and this is why the perception of self is so important, and the self-identity of ourselves is so important. Because if you are manipulated only to see reality via the five senses, then, like I said earlier, what you're looking at is a level of perception that sees everything as apart from everything else. So on that level of perception, dividing the population is a piece of cake, because the five senses are seeing division and apartness as a matter of course. But when you come out of that state of perception, which I call phantom self, the label self, we are having a human experience. Our consciousness, our infinite consciousness, our eternal consciousness, our state of being aware is having a brief human experience. And in that human experience, we pick up labels like man and woman and income brackets and religions and cultures, etc., and sexualities. These labels are not the true I, which is the consciousness having the experience. These labels are simply the experiences that our consciousness is having. So when at what we call death, which is just a transition to a different state of reality outside of the body, what the body does, because of the way it decodes reality, is it locks our perception into these this narrow band of frequency, because that's the band of frequency that it's decoding. So when we are born into this world, the decoding systems of the body, overwhelmingly the five senses, are decoding this band of frequency into the world we think we're experiencing. And therefore, a human acts like a human, and an elephant acts like an elephant, and a duck acts like a duck, because their decoding systems, biological forms, are decoding information that makes one act like a human, one act like an elephant, and one act like a duck. But when we leave the body, we leave that decoding system behind. So therefore, we experience a completely different reality to the one we do as a human. And this is why when you look at all these people, millions of them, that have had these near-death experiences now, when they've left the body, when the body has ceased to function, and then it's been revived and they've returned, they describe a completely different reality and sense of self outside the body. So what we call human is a brief experience our consciousness is having, and those experiences that I've described, the cult wants us to believe is who we are. When these near-death experiences leave the body, they're no longer British or French or any of these labels. Those were experiences they've left behind. They become consciousness that that is their eternal self. And so in terms of self-identity, if you get caught in phantom self, label self, where not that you don't enjoy your experiences and your different races, different religions, different cultures, whatever, that's fine. That's what we come to do. But if we get caught in the idea that that's who we are and nothing more, then we get caught in a whole perception of limitedness. If you look around the world perceived by the five senses, it's all about limitation. It's all about what can't be done and the limits on what can be done, and how it seems to be so physical and dense, and therefore there's so many limits on what you can do. And you see everything as apart from everything else. So like I say, dividing and ruling on these fault lines of religion and race, etc., are very easy. But when you self-identify with the consciousness that's having the experience, and you self-identify that as the eternal, infinite, true I, and you realize that this point of attention we call human is a point of attention created through the decoding system of the body of that infinite awareness that is the true I. And your point of attention and everyone else's point of attention is a point of attention within the same infinite state of awareness, consciousness, what some people call God, I call infinite awareness. And so once you realize that we're all expressions of each other, of the same consciousness, we're just a different point of attention, a different way of looking at everything, because my point of attention has had different experiences to yours, so I will see things in a certain way, you'll see things in your unique way. But in the end, whatever our uniqueness, which we need to express, we're all part of the same whole. Now, when you're coming from that level of awareness and perception and self-identity, now you try dividing and ruling that state of consciousness. You can't do it, because it sees that everyone else is an expression of what it is an expression of. So dividing people in that state of awareness is very, very difficult, if not impossible. And that's why this cult, which is an expression of this Wetiko, has to bring us into the five senses and hold us there, our perceptions, because then they can divide and rule to their heart's content, because it's easy. And when people see themselves as their name, their job, their location, their place of birth, their culture, their religion, then someone else with a different state of birth or place of birth, income bracket, religion, culture, will see to them to be apart from them. And so you've got the fault line immediately. You can divide and play them off against each other. This is what's going on all over the world now. But if we can just realize that we're all expressions of each other, we're all expressions of the same consciousness, then that becomes very, very much more difficult to do. And that's what awakening, a massive part of what we call awakening is. So awakening to the fact that we express our individuality, and so we should. We're all unique parts of this infinite whole. But you realize as you awaken that actually there is an infinite whole of which we're all part. And thus, if you hurt someone else, ultimately you're hurting yourself. We're all one, but we're not all in the same state of consciousness. There is a level of this awareness, this infinite awareness, that I call infinite awareness in awareness of itself. And what I mean by that, it's a state of awareness that knows it's all awareness. this is the level of awareness that people call, again, call God and other names. It's a state of awareness that is so completely infinitely expanded that it knows that it's everything. But there are other expressions of this awareness, this infinite awareness, that are not connected to that level of infinite awareness and awareness of itself. They're not influenced by it. Their consciousness is isolated, separated, not separated literally, but separated perceptually from this greater all-encompassing whole. And so instead of having access to expanded states of awareness, ultimately infinitely expanded awareness, it confines itself through its perceptions to a very tiny expression of infinite awareness, a very tiny part of it. And thus its perceptions, its behavior, and its experience will reflect that. Because every time we think, every time we feel emotions, we are generating a frequency. This is well known. And you've got the slow, low frequencies of fear and anxiety and depression, which is the ones that Icke wants us to fall into for reasons I've explained. And then you've got the high frequencies of love and joy and all these things. And they're very different frequencies generated by our thoughts, our emotional and spiritual state. And I mentioned earlier about this field that connects everything. It's this consciousness, this infinite awareness, and this infinite awareness is pure potential and all possibility. It can manifest. You can manifest anything from it. It's all possibility, all potential. So when you hear phrases describing, quote, God as all that is, has been, and ever can be, the five senses cannot literally process that. Because to the five senses, everything's apart from everything else, and there's a past, a present, and a future, and everything's kind of divided. And so it can't process the perception of all that is, has been, and ever can be. How can you have something that's all that is, has been, past, illusion, and ever can be, future? Well, because you're all possibility and all potential, and thus you have to be all that is, has been, and ever can be to be all possibility. So this field of consciousness is teeming with possibility. But what possibilities are we going to manifest out of that into an experience? Well, if we, for instance, have the self identity that we are little me, that we have no power, that we just have to do what we're told, that perceptual frequency band generated by that perception will be limited because the perception is limited. The perception says, I have no power. I have great limitations of what I can do and all that stuff. I have to do what I'm told because I don't know. That perception is a very limited band of frequency because the perception is limited. And so you are going to be interacting with this infinite potential and possibility of this infinite field within that band of frequency. And what you're going to connect with and pull out of the potential and possibility into an experience will reflect that perception and that band of frequency. And you'll live a limited life. Your perceptions of no power will be expressed as an experience of no power. Not because you have no power, but you don't perceive you have, so therefore that's what you manifest. And that's obviously the state of perception creating a state of experience that this cult wants humanity to have. It wants people in that limited state of manifestation, that limited state of self-identity, because then it can control them, no problem. Do this, oh yes, sir. But when you then expand your self-identity, I am all that is, has been, and ever can be, having a human experience, that I am potentially all consciousness in awareness of itself, that I am an eternal, infinite expression of consciousness exploring infinity infinitely, then that is an expanded sense of self-identity. Not a limited one, I have no power, it's an expanded one. And that perceptual state is therefore generating an expanded frequency field within which you are interacting with all possibility and all probability. And therefore, you are going to live a far more expansive life, a far more adventurous life than someone who thinks they're little me. And if you notice, when people go through this awakening process, it certainly happened to me 31 years ago, they notice that suddenly, it wasn't happening before, but suddenly they have all this synchronicity in their life, that suddenly amazing things happen just at the right time. Things tend to fall into place, and your life is peppered with phrases like, oh, fancy seeing you here, what's the chances of that? Oh, blimey, what's the chances of that happening just when I need it to happen? And why do people start to experience this synchronicity in their life, which they weren't before? Because when you are interacting with infinite possibility and probability in that more expanded way, you are able to manifest more possibility and probability. So your life starts to dramatically change compared with what it was before. So you can see why this cult absolutely works 24/7 to keep people in the 5-sense little me prison and stop them realizing the true nature of who they are, because they can't manipulate that state of consciousness, but they can manipulate that one to their heart's content. It's easy. And we're seeing, like I said earlier, in this COVID era, the difference in human behavior and human perception between those that have allowed themselves to be imprisoned in the 5 senses and little me, and those that have moved into expanded states of awakening. I mean, the difference between the two is very dramatic and very obvious. And unfortunately, the awakening is the smallest group, but it doesn't have to be like that forever.
What can we do to help wake people up?
Well, they can't do more than put information before them. And then people have to choose whether they're going to look at it. And if they look at it, what they make of it. And that will then take care of where they go from there. I think I've been saying this throughout the COVID era, actually. It's very important that people who are awakening are able to detach from the decisions that others make, others that they may very deeply care for, because otherwise that is going to pull you down, and it's going to disempower you. It's difficult, but it's this question: have I done everything that I can to give this person I care for the chance to see through what's going on? And if you have, there's nothing more that you can do, because you can't put them in a ball and chain and force them to do what you think is right. They have to make that decision themselves. If we believe in freedom, then it's the freedom for people to do things that we don't agree with, and have opinions we don't agree with. That's what freedom is. The freedom to believe what I believe is not freedom. It's tyranny, which is what we've got now, of course, around the world, where you have to believe the official narrative, or you get consequences, sanctions. That's not freedom, that's fascism. And freedom is being at peace with someone having a different opinion to you, because you know that they're right to have that opinion, that freedom to have that opinion actually is your freedom to have your opinion, which may differ from that one. Because you can't say you can have the freedom to believe this, but not the freedom to believe that. I mean, from that belief comes behavior. And if that behavior is impacting negatively on other people, well, then there could be an intervention then, of course. But to start policing opinion and view is tyranny. And that's what we've got now on this vast scale. So all you can say to family and friends is, look, here's some information. So you could see this from another angle. But if they don't choose to accept that, then that's their right. And what is life? It's very simple. It's choice and consequence, choice and consequence, choice and consequence. You make choices, and those choices have consequences. If those consequences are what you want, they're nice, then make the same choices. If the consequences are not what you like, then make different choices and you'll change the consequences. And it's just choice and consequence, choice and consequence. And this whole perception of reality and self as consciousness, eternal experiencing consciousness, is also important in regard to this, because if you only see someone as a body and in human form, then you can see them in a certain way. And if they die, of course, you don't want that to happen, and you're very sad, understandably. Then they're not dying. They're leaving this vehicle. It's the vehicle that ceases to operate, not the consciousness. The body has a cycle. We, the true I, have eternity. So as people leave this world, they're only leaving this world. They're not ceasing to exist. They continue in another reality. And when we leave, we'll meet up with them. But it's for those that are awakening, it is about detachment. Once you've done everything you can to put information in front of people, to give them the opportunity to make a different choice, and they don't make that choice, that's fair enough, that's their right, then we must detach from that emotionally. Otherwise, we're just going to get pulled in and pulled in and pulled in, and our frequency is going to be held down instead of going into states of expansion. And what we've seen, obviously, it's going on everywhere, in every country, is this great division and separation of families, where maybe only one person in the family can see through the lies. And it's interesting, that what you're seeing, and in my local community, as well as all over the world, when someone in a family or a group to the rest of them, the rest of them don't just say, I disagree with you. They ostracize them. They dismiss them. They throw them out. They're very antagonistic towards them often. Why is that? Why is that? And I, one of the things that's I think that's happened to many people in this COVID era is they've got so gripped by fear and all that comes from that, that a lot of them have been seriously what I call Wetiko. They've been attached to this Wetiko consciousness. And this Wetiko consciousness doesn't want people to see through what it's doing through its various expressions, your Gateses and Faucis and all these people. So if you're attached to this Wetiko consciousness and it's influencing your perceptions, not least making sure you don't question, then you're going to want them to be antagonistic towards those who've seen through it, because you don't want people seeing through it. And I think that is part of this extraordinary phenomenon where families are breaking up antagonistically. I mean, that should be, well, you know, you're right to your opinion, and you know, explain to me why you've got a problem with it. But no, it's dismissal, it's rejection, it's ostracizing people. It's extraordinary, and it makes no sense in the way things have gone before, where you have a disagreement that, you know, you carry on. There's no carry on. The disagreement ends it with COVID. And I do think it's something to do with this Wetiko consciousness.
Dave, thank you so much. It was a great interview. Do you have final words? And can you tell people where to find you, your information, your work?
Yeah, they can find me at davidicke.com. And I'm doing a live stream for 6 hours on Saturday, November the 6th, when I'll be going really deep in the rabbit hole about all this. This is about, I think it's about 925 images and videos in the 6 hours. It's on iconic.com. And I understand that as soon as it's completed, there's going to be versions of it translated into other languages. So it will get to as many people as we can.
We have a translation team, and we can help translate your material into Portuguese. Just let us know.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'll get my son Jamie onto that. That would be amazing. I love Brazil. I had some amazing experiences near Manaus in the rainforest. Yeah, that's an amazing place with all those rivers and what have you. Yeah, I really loved it. When I'm talking about this field of consciousness energy, which connects us all, you could think of it as what connects all the fish and the sea life, the ocean. It's the same thing, it's the same principle. So when you're in an urban city environment and you've got all the noise and all the traffic and all the stress and all that's going on, it desensitizes you, and you don't connect with other fields of consciousness, which we call trees, animals, each other. You can tend to go around in a bubble, a desensitized bubble. But when you go out into nature, into the rainforest, into the quiet places, and not just quiet in terms of noise, but quiet in terms of energy. Because if you could see the energetic field in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, it'd be going like this. And London and all of them, New York, and so you're in this energy field. You're interacting with it, and then you go out into nature, and the energy field is calm and quiet, and so you resensitize your connection to everything. And because the trees are connecting into the same field that we're connecting with, communication can take place through the field. You know, people talk about talking to plants, but they say, well, how can you talk to plants? They don't understand human language. Well, no, they don't. But what is human language? It's a vibrational field generated by the vocal cords. And so when I'm talking, the vocal cords are generating an information field based on what I'm communicating. And they pass between us as a vibrational field. And then they are decoded by the ear senses into an electrical form and communicated to the brain electrically from the ears, from the waveform. And then the brain decodes the waveform into the words that we hear. So when you talk to plants, they are picking this up. They're not picking the words up, they're picking this up. And they know if you have a kind, benevolent energy or whether you have an aggressive one. And, you know, there have been experiments. I remember reading about one where they had this plant and they put electrodes on it so that they could pick up the electrical response. And they had someone walk in the room and speak very kindly to the plant. And it got a particular electrical response. And then they had someone walk in the room and scream at it and shout at it aggressively. And it was a completely different electrical response from the plant. And the interesting thing was that when they did another part of the experiment, which was the man shouting and being aggressive, walking into the room again without saying a word, the plant responded to that energetic field, which had been so aggressive to it, even though the man wasn't saying anything. It was just his field. It knew what it was. This is how we're communicating all the time, but we don't realize it. And, you know, desensitizing us from this is all part of the conspiracy, because when you become sensitive to this, you realize we're all one. And that's the last thing they want us to know.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, Flavio Valli. Thank you, Brazil. And, you know, thanks for asking me. You're very kind. Bye.
The coronavirus pandemic started in China. Oxygen, medical supplies, and hospital staff have
One of the 5 vaccines in research.
Stage 1, you create a problem. It could be a manufactured virus. You want a reaction, and you want them to either say, do something, or you want them to accept what the authorities suggest must be done. So one of the agendas is to massively cull the population. They want to reduce the numbers.